Hey all, welcome back to Exile Wargaming, where today, and as always, we're going to be talking about winning with Harlequins in competitive 10th edition Warhammer 40k with a battle report against Chaos Space Marines in the Renegade Raiders detachment. Now, first things first, let's go over the list. We have a couple changes in our new outlook. Since the data slate, we are now able to fit in the Death Jester. This was made abundantly clear to me by some of the individuals in the comment section of the last video, and I couldn't be more excited to get him back on the tabletop. So, we have the Solitaire. We have the Death Jester with Fate's Messenger. We have two Troop Masters attached to 2 units of troops inside of 2 Falcons. We have Yvrain in the Vizark, an 11-man unit of troops. We have 2 more troop units to go inside of 2 Starweavers, and the 3rd Starweaver will be used to transport the Death Jester around the table. We have 2 units of Skyweavers with Haywire and Star Bolus and 2 D cannons. Now this list is coming in at a perfect 2,000 points on the nose with 16 total units. Now our opponent is bringing a pretty spicy Chaos Space Marines Renegade Raiders detachment list. They have Abaddon attached to 5 Chosen, 2 Chaos Lords, each attached to a unit of Legionnaires, Cultist Mob, 4 units of Legionnaires with last cannons and all their good stuff, 2 Predator Destructors, 2 Chaos Rhinos to cart around those Legionnaires, a unit of Chaos Bikers with Melta, a Hellbrute with last cannon and the Hellbrute Fists, 2 Venom Crawlers, and a unit of 5 Warp Talons. Now they are coming in at 15 total units at 1,990 points. Now we are playing Terrain Layout 4, Mission D, which is Scorched Earth, Swift Action, and Tipping Point. Getting into deployment, you're not going to see anything different than what we typically do. A lot of symmetry, a lot of ability to attack points in waves, and really just using this Yvrain brick in the center to deter our opponent from either jumping into the midboard or crashing into our line. So we have Yvrain's brick right in the middle behind this rune, so they can't be targeted just yet. If he does bring out a couple things to this angle here, or if he gets them up here, they will very easily be able to be shot at. But at this point in the game, I'm hoping that we can kind of keep forcing them back. He's not going to get that angle on the first turn. And if he puts one of his destructors outwards, I'm okay taking that hit with -1 to hit on our side, but also the invulnerable saves and the feel no pain coming out of some of those units. As long as we can walk out of the first turn with, 4 or 5 Harlequins remaining, we should be able to do pretty well at deterring the midboard. So we put Yvrain's brick in the middle with a D cannon here as well. This should not be able to be targeted early on, and if it is, whatever's going to target it is going to get annihilated afterwards. We have another D cannon behind this rune. We can poke out and get direct line of sight if he chooses to put something out in this section of the board. We have Falcon, a Starweaver, and Skyweavers up here. We have the Death Jester in a Starweaver right back here, just ready to kind of cart around, jump out, get back in, and be kind of a nuisance around the board. We have our symmetry again in another Falcon, a Starweaver, and a set of Skyweavers down here. The Solitaire is in the middle, just waiting to kind of push up. If we get any of those early area denial, secure no man's land, something like that towards the center of the board, we can absolutely get him on here and then phantasm him to safety if we needed to. Now our opponent ends up staging everything to kind of take and contest this section of the board over here. So there is a Predator Destructor right here. There is a Rhino with 2 units of Legionnaires and a Chaos Lord inside of it. The Chaos Bikers are up here, and there's a Venom Crawler as well. There is a Hellbrute down here, able to kind of shift up and give all its lethal and sustained pact bonuses. There is another Predator Destructor right here, and Abaddon's unit with the Chosen in the center. Just, again, being able to kind of stretch out and hand out all of those reroll to hit or invulnerable saves to anyone else around. Down here at the bottom, we have another Rhino and a Venom Crawler. The Warp Talons are in Deep Strike right now. So on our opponent's first turn, they end up just shuffling a couple things around the board. I believe they put some Legionnaires up here. They start staging a little bit more appropriately. And I believe he actually backs off Abaddon's unit this turn. So he's experienced this before. We don't want to phantasm this unit up. If we get like a 5 or a 6, then we cross the board. We could charge Abaddon's unit, and that can spell doom for him for the rest of the game. So he does end up just backing these up here. I think the game plan is for him to just castle. Now, our opponent did win the first turn, and they ended up drawing Marked for Death and Engage on all fronts. They pretty much just shifted all of their forces to get onto this objective, be in range of invulnerable saves or rerolls afterwards. So nothing much happened here. A unit of Legionnaires came out and is holding this point up top. The Venom Crawler and the Rhino just kind of positioned to be able to take advantage of this objective afterwards. They were not able to score any of the secondaries. They are going to go up 3 CP this turn and discard both of them. Now on our turn, we really just want to start pushing and contesting these objectives. This Yvrain brick versus Abaddon and everything else is a very, very big deal. So we end up using the Solitaire, drawing our secondaries in area denial and behind enemy lines, and we're going to use the Solitaire to just push up here. We have Phantasm in our back pocket to bring him to safety if we needed to, but we are going to score 5 on area denial. We're going to pitch behind enemy lines. We end up moving our Star Weaver with our troops down to this objective. Hopefully we could just activation lock our opponent. And we leave the Falcon back here if we need to, counterpunch whatever comes onto this. And we don't have any good targets for the Skyweavers, so they are just going to sit back here as well. Our opponent did a really good job of hiding their force. We're kind of just wasting our first turns, but if we can come away with a few secondaries and contest his objective the following turn, we are in really, really great shape. So the goal here is to just push up these troops, use this Star Weaver, maybe grenades, or our fusion pistols, whatever it may be, to bring down these Legionnaires and give our opponent a 5 on primary on turn 2. So our Star Weaver ends up rolling pretty hot at the top, and I believe we're able to bring down 3 of the Legionnaires, and then the Harlequins themselves are able to bring down the other 2 with their fusion pistols. We did not have to throw grenades at that point. So very good. We did clear this objective. We're most likely going to get our troops back into the Star Weaver at the end of the turn. Now the D cannons end up firing into this Rhino over here, and we are able to blow it up. So we disembarks both units of troops. One comes down here and the other up front, so they are going to be able to push our objective here afterwards. But we are walking out of this turn without too many casualties, and we are ready to get to work. In our opponent's turn 2, they end up drawing Assassination and Established Locust. So they are going to go 2 turns without scoring a single secondary to start the game off, which is pretty brutal for them. Now, they end up moving up this unit of cultists. This home field objective is sticky. We don't have anything in deep strike or reserves, so this is relatively safe. But this unit ends up moving out. Abaddon and the Chosen shift out a little bit. The Hellbrute gets up here to just do a couple things, maybe defensively afterwards. The Venom Crawler up top, the bikes, and this Rhino all end up putting some shots into this Star Weaver. They are able to bring it down. I believe we ended up using a Fate dice to save it from one of the last cannons, so that he had to activate the entirety of the Venom Crawler into it afterwards. So there was no fire coming into our troops that got out afterwards, and they are in pretty well in good position to push back onto this objective afterwards. Now, this unit of Legionnaires that got out of the Rhino that exploded early on, ended up pushing forward. They were not able to bring the Star Weaver down in shooting, and they end up charging it at the end of the turn. The unit of troops gets out, and they will have their opportunity to counterpunch the following turn. This is why I love Star Weavers. I know they're relatively expensive, but they do so much good work at keeping our opponents at bay. There's always something left over to punch back if we really need to. In our turn 2, we end up drawing Defend Stronghold and Establish Locust. So really what we want to do is kind of force our opponent to start coming out and exposing a little bit more of their force. Now we are fighting and contesting these objectives on the outer edges of the board, right up here and then right down here, but this middle could really change the tide of the game. We want to get these destructors out and exposed as soon as we can. If the game goes too late and they have the ability to just wipe out everything that we get into. Typically in a game like this, if these weren't sitting here, I would have pushed Yvrane's unit all the way in and tied up our opponent for as many turns as I possibly could. But one of these pointing at a unit of our troops is just death. So let alone two, I don't really want to risk it. I don't want to lose that unit. Right now, we're kind of stalemated in the middle. So we are going to use the Solitaire to try and burn the center objective and really force our opponent outward. I know they have these cultists here, but you know, any little thing that we can do to slowly get them to get rid of their assets will help us long term when we get to turns 4 and 5. So we end up using our Skyweavers to push up here. Our troops that ended up getting out of the blown up Star Weaver push up over here. We throw grenades. We shoot some fusion pistols into the Legionnaires, and we're able to bring down a few of them. Then we use the Skyweavers. We use the Skyweavers before we start shooting into Legionnaires because they're inside the Rhino to bring down the Rhino in conjunction with the D cannon up here. So we are able to bring it down. Then the troops go into this unit, and the hope is to just charge them and get them off the objective afterwards. But there is a Chaos Lord. Down here, our troops that got out of the Star Weaver end up putting a pretty good beating on some of these Legionnaires. There was no Chaos Lord in them, so I believe we brought down a couple, and we're hoping to finish them off in combat afterwards. In the charge phase, our opponents lose the Legionnaires on the bottom objective, but they are able to hold on with the Chaos Lord on the top. He gets to swing back and ends up bringing down 4 of our Harlequin troops. We have just the lead player left. The Chaos Lord is on 1 wound. Now, they were not positioned here for purposes of the game. They were actually back here on the objective. But sometimes with the shadows and all the wild stuff, you got to be able to take a picture in some good light. So we are contesting this objective. Our opponent does have the Chaos Lord on there. We are not going to take it entirely from them, but we're going to make sure that they can't score anyway. In our opponent's turn 3, they score another 5 on secondaries. So we're doing a really, really great job at this point, just holding them down from a point standpoint, but they end up drawing area denial and containment. So they are going to walk away at the end of this turn with at least 11 secondaries, which is a good makeup for what they lost in the first couple turns. So the Warp Talents ended up rapid ingressing onto our board at the end of our movement phase right back here. They're going to move up and looks like take out this D cannon. These D cannons are really worrying our opponent at this point. So I am glad they're doing their job. Even if they haven't done a ton yet, they've really dictated the kind of ability our opponent has on the board. They cannot get these destructors in really great position. There's no real point in exposing them so that they can shoot, you know, a 75-point unit and then get wiped off the board from, you know, D cannons or Falcons afterwards. So D cannons doing their jobs, but the Warp Talents end up moving up into the middle of the board. Looks like they're going to charge this. We end up phantasming our Solitaire. I think we get a 5 or a 6, which was pretty good, and get him back into cover. And then the cultists end up moving up onto the center objective, so we are not going to burn it at the end of the turn. The Legionnaires down here end up pushing forward onto this objective. They're going to take it from our troops. Maybe they can get a good charge into the Skyweavers as well. Up top, The Venom Crawler and the bikes are very easily able to take down the Skyweavers, and the Chaos Lord falls back and leaves our Harlequin troop exposed to get wiped out as well. So we are off of this objective. They're going to control this objective. They're going to control the center, and we are going to end up going into our turn scoring only a 5 in primary points at best. Now, our opponents end up charging the D-Cannon. Those Warp Talons are able to bring that down, and then the Warp Talons pick up and are off the board. The Legionnaires with the Chaos Lord are also able to bring down our unit of Harlequin troops at the bottom. It was very sad, but there's not a single one remaining. Hopefully, this Falcon and the Skyweavers and the troops inside are able to take them out afterwards, and we can just hold this objective for the remainder of the game. In our turn 3, we end up drawing no prisoners and marked for death. Now, we are not going to get marked for death at this point in time. I think he chose both of the Destructors and maybe this Venom Crawler. I'm not entirely sure, but maybe it was Abaddon's unit. So what we ended up doing is moving our Falcon out up here. We end up getting our troops out. And we put the Shuriken Cannon into the Chaos Lord over here. So the Falcon is going to end up firing into the Destructor up here with its Bright Lance and its Pulse Laser. And this entire game, the Falcons just felt useless. We didn't hit or damage with a single Bright Lance forever. I think out of all of the Pulse Laser shots, we missed with both the Bright Lance. We hit with one Pulse Laser. He missed the save, and we got 2 damage through on here. So that was brutal. And then up top here, the Falcon was not able to bring down the Venom Crawler. It took a couple wounds from failed pact earlier on in the game and just kind of blanks everything. Shuriken cannons were pretty good, but our troop over here end up getting out. We fire into the bikes, I believe, and the Venom Crawler, and we're going to hope that we get some rerolls from the troop and their fusion pistols and everything else afterwards. Yvrane's unit just pokes its head out. We have some neurodisruptors and Yvrane's ridiculous attack up top here. They are able to bring down all of the cultists with the Death Jester getting out of his transport on the home field objective and shooting in there. The Skyweavers end up pushing out and get some shots into the Venom Crawler. They do some very good work. And then the Solitaire ends up moving out to fight the Venom Crawler afterwards. I believe we are able to bring this down in its entirety in the charge phase. So we end up charging. We move the Solitaire onto their home field objective so that we can take that from them afterwards. The Harlequin troop on this bottom portion ends up getting into the Legionnaires with the Chaos Lord, and with the fusion pistols and the charge and the devastating wounds, I believe we are able to bring that unit down in its entirety. So hopefully this next turn we can kind of bring Yvrane's unit back if we need to Phantasm, if we get a decent one, and we won't have to worry about, this Destructor coming in and just ruining our life. But we end up walking out with a 5 on no prisoners and moving on to our opponent's next turn. So turn 4 for our opponent, they get recover assets and storm hostile objectives. So they end up pushing up the Predator Destructor over here to get a direct line of sight onto Yvrane's unit. This Destructor comes out over here as well. I think it was to push them, force me to Phantasm and use the command point afterwards. Abaddon's unit stays right here, and then the Venom Crawler ends up putting all of its shots and everything into this Harlequin troop. They are able to do some very good work. I believe the Chaos Lord was still over here as well, and does a pretty good bit of damage before we get into the fight phase. So the Solitaire is back here. We are able to kind of shift and move at the end of the fight phase. We're able to bring the Solitaire back behind this wall after beating up the Venom Crawler. So we are not going to contest this. The Destructor does a little bit too much work for us, and we're just going to kind of see where it goes. But as of right now, our opponent will hold this objective, their home objective, and this back one is very easily ours. So in our turn 4, we only end up getting 5 points in primary, and then we draw overwhelming force and containment. This game just feels so shifty at this point. It's like I almost don't know what to do. We're both kind of hiding from each other for the entirety of the game. So we are able to bring down the Chaos Lord over here. We are going to hold this objective. We end up moving the Falcon up. Nothing, no damage, anything from here. He neglects to overwatch over here. We move the Skyweavers up to get shots into this destructor, and he does end up overwatching and brings down one of them. Abaddon's unit being in the middle, we may want to put some shots into them. The Hellbrute's back here, but really we just want to contest as much as we can and try to run away on the scoreboard. We do have the bottom of the turn, so I'm just hoping that we can really make something happen afterwards. We're still holding our home field, doing some pretty good work. This D cannon ends up firing into this destructor with the Falcon, and we are able to blow that up. The Falcon right here fires into this destructor as well as the Death Jester. And there was one other thing I believe that fired. No, it was the two of those. We may have split shots, but we're able to end up bringing down this unit, and we just keep whiffing with our Bright Lances. There's also a Venom Crawler back on this objective. So we're kind of just staging here and hoping for the best. We're going to use lightning fast reactions. We're going to hope our opponent can't hit us. This Falcon hasn't taken any damage just yet. And at the end of the game, if he can stay there, tried and true, then we are in really, really great shape. But we're going to walk out of this turn with 11 points in secondary because we are able to take this bottom objective away from our opponent for overwhelming force, and then we get containment afterwards. Now, it is worth noting that our opponent rapid ingressed with the Warp Talons back here, and they may have an opportunity to take this objective in their following turn. Now, in our opponent's fifth turn, they end up scoring 10 on their primary and then draw secure no man's land and no prisoners. So they are able to get, I believe, 4 points on no prisoners, which is pretty good. But then they push the Venom Crawler and the Destructor up to make some things happen. So this Destructor ends up firing its shots into this unit of Harlequin troops. And then Abaddon's unit comes towards the center to try to make something happen afterwards. Our unit of Warp Talons comes into our Harlequin troop at the bottom. They end up doing some pretty good work over there. And then I believe in the charge phase, things get a little bit spicy. So Abaddon's unit ends up pushing into the D cannon and Yvraine up here. The troops end up going, the way the math was working out, the D cannon made it a little bit difficult, but the D cannon would have swung the game. So Abaddon ends up having to fire into the D cannon. Yvraine ends up surviving on 2 wounds, which is pretty decent for us, and the Vizark is in great shape right over here. The Warp Talons are able to bring down all of this Harlequin troop. I believe we did lightning fast reactions, and I think we have a Troop Master left over here, if anything. It's just the Troop Master on a couple wounds. Up top, they tank shocked with, I believe, the Annihilator into the Falcon, and then the Venom Crawler came in as well. It ends up leaving the Falcon. We had a fate dice at 1 wound remaining. So depending on what happens for this next turn, we may really get to make something happen. Over here, the Hellbrute ended up moving down to reclaim this objective from our Solitaire, which he did, but unfortunately just can't get around to make anything happen afterwards. So we are going to lose on primary this following turn, but if we were scoring in the beginning of the turn, but because we are scoring at the bottom and we can still burn an objective, I think we can end up running away with this game, even though our opponent is in a much better position than us. So it's turn 5. Because we score at the end of the turn, we can pretty much do whatever it is we want, and this is kind of what I was hoping for the entirety of the game. I'm going to run away from the difficult units. I'm just going to contest long enough to be able to run away at the end. So we end up drawing cleanse and recover assets. We used feign retreat, get out of combat with Abaddon. We can cleanse and recover on the center objective. I believe we just cleanse, and we end up burning the center objective over here. We move the Solitaire off our opponent's home field. We move the Skyweaver up. I think that's who ends up recovering assets. And then we can charge into these Warp Talons and just take this objective afterwards. So we end up scoring 20 points in primary at the end of the game and another 5 in secondaries. Our opponent, if they were given another turn, may have really been able to change some things, being able to get rid of the fights first on the Harlequin troops. Abaddon would have just ran wild in the center. I think these Destructors would have been able to finish off whatever they needed to, and this Venom Crawler as well. Again, I wish the Falcon did something this game. I mean, it handed out some rerolls, but it missed almost every single Bright Lance and Pulse Laser shot. Nothing wounded, nothing was hitting. It was pretty brutal, but we are able to walk out of this game a victor in a very, very close matchup. So at the end of the game, we end up scoring 81 to 62. I know it says 60 on this, but it was actually 62 as I found coming back into this. We snubbed our opponent, or they snubbed themselves, 2 points and no prisoners on that last turn. So we are okay. Do I believe this was a great matchup for us? No, I think a lot of the stars aligned, and we ended up getting bottom of the turn on this mission. Having bottom of the turn let us play an entirely different game than we would have had to if we had to be the attacker. Generally, I would have pushed up Yvrane's unit much sooner. We'd have tried to tie up a couple things, and really just went a little bit more proactive against the Destructors. Everything else, we can trade. It seems like in this matchup, every single thing that we has trades evenly for something else. Legionnaires trade really well with our troops. It's not really a trade up or a trade down for either one of them. We both need them. The Rhinos and the Star Weavers are both as expendable as each other. The Falcons didn't really do much work. We weren't rolling very well in any way, shape, or form. The D cannons were actually really incredible this game. Being able to bring down, I believe, Rhino, being able to bring down a Destructor, keeping our opponents pushed back, allowing them to not really be able to push up Abaddon and stage him appropriately earlier in the game. I know that they can advance and charge out of that rune, but if he gets himself into range to have a good advance and a charge, the D cannons were able to just start wiping them slowly off the board and putting -1 modifiers on them to hit. Yvrane seemed difficult to gain value from in this game, I will say, because of the Destructors. It really made me play a little apprehensive. This isn't the typical way I like to play this list. I know we did some things, but it was a lot of decision making, and I think at the end, because we won, there was clearly the right decisions, but it just felt like I was on my back foot the whole game, and I was second guessing myself almost every turn. So I'm glad that we were able to just slowly trade and attack in waves, which is always the plan, and that it worked. But overall, if our opponent had the bottom of the turn, I think this game would have been entirely different. It seemed like a big swing, like we won by a huge margin, but as you can see on the scoreboard, our opponent scored 5, 5, 5, 10 for primary, and we ended up scoring 10, 5, 5, and then because we had the bottom of the turn, we were able to burn an objective. And a couple other things, just being able to hold all of them at the end, we end up scoring a 20. So maybe, we bring this down 10 points. It's a 10-point swing. If our opponent would have got some better secondaries in these, the game could have gone either way, depending on who had the first or the second turn. But thus is Warhammer, and unfortunately, sometimes this happens. You're going to see in another game that we play here recently that it is possible to happen even to us Harlequin players, as it probably seems to happen for all of you way more than anything else. But thank you again. I hope you enjoyed. This game was a little bit more challenging and unpredictable than we had originally hoped for, but that's Warhammer. Sometimes you just got to get a little bit lucky. Over the next couple weeks, we'll be posting a few more battle reports. I got a ton of games in this past week, and what you can expect to see is something more along the lines of a traditional Harlequin list. We are not going to bring in anything from the standard Eldari index, with the exception in one game of a couple Wave Serpents. So we got a game against Necrons in the Awakened Dynasty and another game against Black Templars in the Righteous Crusaders detachment. It should be fun, but thank you again. Please like, share, and subscribe. There will be a link for the Discord in the description below. Thanks again. I'll see y'all next time.